What's up, YouTubers? So it's Friday night, and rather than going out to the tavern and drinking a bunch of brandy old fashions, I thought, why not sit down and do the second part of I don't even know how many part video series I'm going to do on dual shield flux core wire. Now, this is the second video. If you haven't seen the first, please watch it. I'll put a link in the description so that you're up to speed. But just as a brief overview, so we're all on the same page, I bought a big 11-pound spool of dual shield wire off of Amazon, Blue Demon brand, in 035 size. And the purpose of that is to test whether or not dual shield wire in small diameter is a viable option for us home gamers to weld thicker steel with MIG welders that aren't necessarily the most powerful things in the world. And what I mean by that is dual shield is typically done with 045 and 1/16 and bigger wires with big wire welders, and we don't have typically in the home 250, 350 amp machines. So the fact that you can run dual shield wire, there's a few companies out there, ESAB, Blue Demon, and Lincoln, all make 035 dual shield wire, which you could run in a 200 amp class MIG welder. Now, I'll briefly go over it again. Again, a lot of this is in the first video, but the purpose of dual shield is it's basically a flux core wire that has gas shielding with it. And if you do any amount of just gasless flux core, you're going to find that it has a tendency to produce porosity in many cases. Like if you weld thick steel like 1/4 inch and above with 035 flux core, you're going to tend to see porosity. It has great penetration, but the weld defects are somewhat of an issue. And I've also tested on my channel running 035 straight flux core, so gasless, so no gas shielding. And when you weld 3/8, it's pretty much hopeless to get a clean weld. Like, you're just going to get porosity. Also, if you do spot welds, you tend to get porosity. So at the end of the day, I love gasless flux core. It's a great product, but it kind of falls apart, to be honest, on thicker plate and spot welds. Unless you go to bigger wire, but then bigger wire than 035 typically requires a bigger welder than a 200 amp machine, and then you're stuck in this, well, you need a bigger MIG welder. So again, whole purpose of this video series is to tackle whether or not dual shield is worth it, because, well, for one, you have the added cost of additional gas, and the wire is more expensive, and you got to buy 50 bucks or 70 bucks worth of the wire. You can't get mini spools of it. You have to buy a big 10+ pound spool. And whether or not if it works, because the whole theory of me testing it was, my hope was that I could weld 1/4 inch to 3/8 plate with a 200 amp MIG welder, get porosity free welds with decent penetration. And what we're going to find by the end of the day with this testing is that some of those things do work or are true, and some of them aren't. So it's going to be an interesting video. Without any further wasting of time, let's get into it. So generally when I produce videos for you guys, I just go shoot from the hip. I basically just come up with an idea or take one off the endless list I have of video ideas and just start shooting it, and I don't pre-rehearse, don't write anything down, and whatever happens, happens. This is one of the few times where I did do some testing and stuff outside of what you're gonna see today. And the reason is that back when I did part 1, I kind of had interesting results where the penetration of the wire on that 1/4 inch plate where I did something like this isn't it, but I ran a couple beads, cut and etched it in that video, and the penetration was pretty odd on it, like AKA not a whole lot. So it was so striking, as a matter of fact, that I ended up doing some research to try and find out, well, maybe my settings are off, okay? Maybe, my amperage that my machine can pull from my generator isn't enough, and that's why. And I just went down a whole rabbit hole of research to try and figure out what was going on. And unfortunately, 035 dual shield has so little information available for it out there, and so few people have actually ran it, that getting reliable information is almost impossible. And not only that, I saw settings, like some people were like, well, run it at this settings. Other people were like these settings. And I came to the conclusion that people run this stuff anywhere from like 21 volts and 290, 280 inches per minute, all the way up to like 450 inches per minute and 28 volts. So that's such a ridiculous range that it's like, well, where do you even start? Now, in the previous video, I had run beads on plate much like these, and the beads look good. There's no porosity in them, but they just lack penetration. So after I had shot that video, I ran a couple fillet welds, which this is one of them, and just cut it and etched it and looked at it to see if what was going on here was seen in this, and the results were kind of unfavorable. Like, you look at this weld here, and let me focus it for you. It's flat, looks good, wetted out properly, okay? So everything's good with it, but basically the penetration wasn't there on it, which was kind of surprising because I've never ran dual shield in the past and had an issue with penetration, but I was running big, thick, wires like 1/16 and stuff when I was in school. So long story short, I just seem to have undesirable results from this particular wire. So again, I guess in the last, week or so since I shot that video, I did a ton more research and came to the conclusion that I guess that's just what's going to happen with 035 wire. And to prove that and kind of, I guess, really look at this, I cut a bunch of coupons here, and we're going to do 4 welds with this dual shield at completely varying voltages and wire feed. We're going to cut and etch all of them and look at it, and then we can all make a conclusion as to whether or not this is a viable option. And I think the results will probably surprise you as they did me. And again, I apologize for not taking you with me when I was kind of behind the scenes doing some tests. It's just, I don't know, I didn't have time and I just wanted to crank it out and see what was going on. But, you'll at least be part with me as I test this further. But I don't know, it's going to be interesting. So let me just basically get this all set up and fully weld them and come back and we'll cut and etch it and talk about it. All right, so here I have the cut and etches, and we'll look at it in a second. I just wanted to talk about something really quick. When you look at all of these welds, so this is the first one, second one, third one, fourth one over here, all the welds look very similar. I mean, basically, they're exactly flat. They ran about the same going in. However, number 1 and 2 function more as a globular, where I could see like globs of metal dripping off the wire. When I hit 3 and definitely on 4, this was spray transferring at number 4 at 25 volts. The wire was liquid and it just hissed. There was no popping, there was almost no spatter. It was super quiet and just hissed. So it definitely converted over to spray at the higher 25, 26 volts in that ballpark, which was interesting. Now, part of the reason why these all look similar is just because as the wire feed increased, I just tried to move a little bit faster so that my weld wouldn't get excessively wide. But I guess we'll have to look at the cut and etch to really get an idea of what happened with these. So let's look at it. So if you look here, the 22.5 volt 320, virtually no root fusion. It barely bit into the side, the top or bottom plate, and upping the voltage a little bit and putting a bunch more wire on it didn't really do much. I mean, if I had to pick between the two, obviously I would take the 23 volt one, but not a huge difference between those settings. The next set, I really upped the ante on those to see what would happen, and So now this test is a little bit different, but you can see virtually no root fusion. I mean, I upped the voltage to 25, 26 volts, significantly more wire. I mean, the one I ran at 420 inch per minute for wire feed, I metered the output on that, and it was at exactly 200 amps of actual output on my particular machine. Now, my machine will exceed 200, probably up to 210, 220 temporarily, but that's my machine. Most home hobby, 170 to 200 amp MIG welders won't even output 25, 26 volts, let alone, over 200 amps of output. So that's kind of unfortunate, but at least at the settings that I was able to run, that's the results that I had. I did run one at around 440 inch per minute and 26 volt, which of course tripped the breaker on my generator. The output was somewhere around 215 for amperage, but it basically kicked out so fast I didn't have much of a weld. I did kind of cut, etch and polish it, etc., and it didn't really look any better than these. So I don't know what to say. Interesting results. I'm going to put up a comparison between both of them so we can look at the differences with the increase in settings. So when you look at this, there's clear evidence that the higher voltage and wire feed, it bit into those plates so much better than the initial set. So that's a benefit, but the root fusion among all of them is basically the same or got worse. Now my welder, I couldn't really get much over, say, 430 inch per minute. Maybe if you ran this at 26, 27 volts and something like 500 inch per minute, it would bite into this plate. But honestly, I'm kind of doubting it. And when I'm editing this video, I'm even bothered to look up more settings. And from what I'm seeing, nobody really recommends 035 flux core to be run, I guess much above 180 to 210 amps of output. I mean, that's everything I could find was that range and no higher. So I don't really know that higher numbers would really make a difference. I think a thicker wire is the right way to go. And the settings that I looked up were for dual shield, by the way, and ESAB actually fixed their calculator, their weld calculator for the phone, because that gave me some erroneous numbers as well. But I was running in the ballpark of it, and at the max basically I could get out of my welder. I don't think I can get any more. And what bothers me the most, I guess, about this is that visually all these welds look the same. Even if higher values would produce more penetration, the weld would probably look the same. And that's a little disconcerting to me because from a visual inspection standpoint, you'd have no idea if there's any root fusion. I mean, really, is that a big deal? Well, I would say it is, because how many people really do, cut and etches or x-ray tests or anything like that? So we go a lot off of visual, and at least with stick welding, I know if it visually looks okay, there's probably some root fusion. And if there's no root fusion, bending the weld towards the face it's gonna give up so easy, and you're gonna see that when I test the strength of that. So let's go to conclusion. Well, based on the cut and etch of this wire, I gotta say that I guess I wouldn't really recommend it. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. I mean, let's talk about the positives first, right? Let's always focus on the positives. It produces a weld that is extremely clean, extremely flat, looks really good, very easy to run. Like, I wasn't perfectly smooth because I had a camera in my face, and a finished weld, at setting 2, 3, and 4 was very good, like almost no spatter, no BBs, just was a good looking weld. So very easy to run. It's also very easy to weld out of position, so vertical up with this product. I tested that, didn't shoot video of it, but it runs really easy vertical up, far easier than gas shielded MIG. So those are all positives. The negatives are, well, I ran a pretty wide range of settings and have zero root fusion. That's kind of a serious problem. Now, depending on what you're welding, it might not matter, but I would say that considering short arc MIG has more penetration on 1/4 inch than this by far. If you're doing a single weld on something, short arc MIG could potentially have more mechanical strength than this. So that's kind of a disappointment. If anything, it really reminds me, like I had said, that it looks like 7014 rod. 7014 produces a really weird penetration profile on 1/4 inch and above, where it just fuses the sides and skips the root entirely, very much like this product. Now, I don't believe this is limited to just the Blue Demon product, and the reason I say that is that when I did research trying to figure out why this had limited penetration, I ran into people talking about the same thing on 1/4 inch and above plate with Lincoln's wire and ESAB's wire. So what it appears to me is that just 035 dual shield, for whatever reason, loses penetration on 1/4 inch and above material. So yeah, it produces clean welds, but it has no root fusion, and that is, like I said, a strength issue. Now, how much of a strength issue is it? Well, guess what? In the near future, I'll be testing this against stick and TIG in a big shootout to doing brake tests on welds kind of like this, to where we can kind of see what's going on and make assumptions on our own based on the data as to what's the best for your situation. But this product, like I said, I don't like it, and based on the test results, I probably won't use it. Now, I will say this. It's possible, when I looked up the range of voltage that this product is generally used at, I got a range of like 22 to 30 volts. My machine only goes to 26. I ran this at 26 and it didn't have any root fusion either, and that 25 volts you saw in this test, it had no root fusion. Is it a possibility at 27, 28 volts and at some wire feed that this will all come together and produce a solid weld with good penetration? Yes, it is possible. I can't run it because my machine's not capable. Why is that a problem? Well, almost every home hobby wire welder, MIG welder can't exceed typically 23, 24 volts. Mine can go up to 26, but virtually none of them that you guys probably have go over 26 volts. So if this product runs better at 28, 29 volts, well, that's cool. Most of us can't use it for that anyways. And if we had that kind of power, we would be using 045 or bigger flux core dual shield. We wouldn't be trying to use 035. Like, the whole point of this product is basically to get higher performance on thicker material than you can get with other, basically short arc MIG or with straight flux core. And it, in my opinion, has failed at that. And there's another thing related to that as well that I wanted to mention. This seems to run at lower amperage per given wire feed than short arc MIG. When I was running, I've ran this up to 430 inches per minute, and it's only pulling about 30 amps through my welder from my generator. So likely because it's a thin-walled hollow tube, it takes a lot less current to clear the short on it, and well, when it hits high enough voltage, it's spray arcing anyways. But it's very forgiving in that sense. Like, it doesn't draw that much power to run these welds, but again, what good is that if it can't penetrate? Also, I had a few issues with this at the start. If you watched the previous video to this, I had issues with it falling off the spool, which that hasn't happened again, but I've had it twice where for some reason the wire kind of pushes through the liners, like starts to bird's nest by the feed rollers. I'm not sure why. I screwed around with the settings for the pressure, so the drive roll tension, and I was able to do these tests successfully, but I've seen issues with that as well. So something else to think of. And I guess the last thing I'll say on this is that this product you have to buy in 10 plus pound spools. So I paid $50 for 10 pounds. Plus you have to run shielding gas. I don't really see the economics of running this product over just gas shielded MIG. because the wire itself is more expensive and you still have to run the same shielding. So that's, again, I will say the deposition rate seems way higher than short arc MIG. Like I'm able to put really big welds down, or, acceptable size welds faster, but what's that worth? I guess not much to me. Oh, and I almost forgot. You guys should have reminded me. This wire can run with 100% CO2. I bet the penetration would probably be better with 100% CO2, but here's the problem with that. According to all the specs I could find on 035 wire, 100% CO2, you have to start at like 26 volts and go up. Much like when you run hardwire MIG with CO2, you have to run higher voltage. So basically, if I even attempted to run this with CO2, I think I wouldn't have enough voltage and it would have unacceptable results or no increase in penetration. So basically, I guess the unfortunate truth with this is what I'm seeing here is that no matter how you look at it, this doesn't seem to have better performance on thicker steel 1/4 inch and above than even hardwire MIG does. It just makes a better looking weld, and it does produce welds free of porosity, which flux core gasless tends to have porosity issues on stuff like this. So super clean welds, but I don't know, I wouldn't recommend this. If you guys think that maybe I ran settings that weren't ideal and you have an idea, let me know, because I kind of went into this blind and there isn't a whole lot available, and I ran a variety of settings, far more than what you saw in this test, and I 100% didn't have one weld that showed decent fusion in the root at all. The higher voltage seems to bite in the sides more, but I guess it is what it is. So is this an answer to getting better performance on thicker steel than short arc MIG? I would say no. So I wouldn't recommend it, at least for the time being, and unless something changes, I guess that's going to be my opinion on it. I think for 3/16 and under steel, it would probably make very good looking welds fast that are clean, so great option there, but not on thicker steel, which is kind of a disappointment. I guess it all goes back to, if you want to weld thick steel, you got to have a big boy MIG welder, big boy wire welder that has at least 250, 275 amps, so you can get it done. But if you don't have that, stick is still your best option, or TIG. With that said, thanks for sticking around, guys. I appreciate it. Till next time.